My brother fired me on a Tuesday, made me pack my things while the office watched, then smiled like he'd finally won something. I didn't fight, didn't beg, just walked out with a quiet wave and a box of old files. He thought that was the end of it. What he didn't know was, while he inherited the title, I'd been given the rest, the patents, the land, the systems he never bothered to learn. By the time he realized what he'd thrown away, the structure had already started to collapse, and I didn't even have to lift a finger. Before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a story. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or pushed aside quietly, this one's for you. The drive home took 13 minutes, but I don't remember making a single turn. I parked in front of the duplex, engine still running, my badge still clipped to my coat. It was warm for February, warm enough that the iced coffee in the cup holder hadn't melted. My palms were damp anyway. The paper box of my office things sat beside me, top flaps open like they expected me to sort through them, like any of it mattered. A framed photo of the production floor. My old red stapler. One of Dad's engraved pens. Everything felt borrowed now, like I'd never really owned it. The last thing I packed was a strip of Post-its from April's desk, without asking. I just took them. She was pretending to fill out forms while her eyes glassed over, like I was dying in front of her and she wasn't allowed to cry. "Let me know if you want me to drop your laptop off at home," she whispered, even though Cal was just 2 doors down, probably standing with his arms crossed like a prom king who'd finally locked the gym doors. "Thanks," I told her, and I meant it. But I didn't want the laptop. I didn't want anything that came from him. Cal didn't fire me in private, which is what really stuck. He waited until the Tuesday check-in, called in 2 mid-level managers, guys who used to take direction from me, and then handed me a letter like it was a parking citation. "We've decided to make a leadership transition," he said, reading off a script like he hadn't practiced it in front of a mirror. "Effective immediately." Then he folded his hands and said, "This isn't personal, Rowan," which was hilarious because Cal has never had a conversation in his life that wasn't personal. He made me shake his hand. I didn't. I nodded once and walked. I don't remember walking through the main floor, just the sound, quiet clicks of keyboards, the metallic hum of someone's space heater, a printer jamming in the back. No one made eye contact. Not even Pete, and Pete owes me his job. The silence was loud enough to drown in. Then I passed the break room, and something in me caught. There was a half-eaten muffin on the table, still in the tin I brought last Friday. Lemon poppy seed. Cal's favorite. I stood there too long, I think. Just looking at it, like it meant something. Then I left. Dad hasn't called. That part surprises people. They think he'd rush in, that he'd fix it, fire Cal, apologize. But he's been silent. And silence from Dad doesn't mean indifference. It means calculation. He's letting it play. He's watching what I do with it. "It's your move," he once told me years ago, after Cal tanked a sales call and I stayed late to salvage it. "You're the one with teeth." I didn't know what that meant then. I do now. I didn't go home. I drove to the plant. The old one, our first facility, before the expansion. It's half shut down now, but I still have keys. I let myself in through the side and sat on the metal stairs overlooking what used to be Assembly Line 3. It smelled like sawdust and rust and whatever else makes up the bones of something that once worked. I stayed there until the sun started bleeding through the upper windows, casting everything gold and red and strange. I used to dream of running this place. I don't dream like that anymore. A text came in. "Cal. 1 line. Hope we can talk soon." I stared at it until the screen dimmed, then powered my phone off. There was nothing left to talk about. He did what he's always done. Took what wasn't his and wore it like it fit. But this time, he did it in front of everyone. There's no coming back from that, not for him. He thinks I'm licking wounds. That's fine. Let him think it. He's already built his throne on ground he doesn't understand. By the time I got home, the coffee had gone watery. I didn't bother locking the car. I carried the box upstairs, put the pen on my nightstand, and left everything else on the floor. When I sat down, I felt the space under my ribs ache in that way it does when you've been holding your breath for too long. I let it out slow. Not rage, not sadness. Just space. A woman can lose her title, her desk, her badge, and still keep the blueprint. And if you know the blueprint, you know exactly where the cracks begin. It started small, as these things do, the kind of mistake that wouldn't get noticed unless you'd built the system from scratch, which I had. A missed invoice from our Ontario supplier, then an overseas shipment stuck at customs, flagged for incorrect documentation. I sat at my kitchen table with tea gone cold, watching the alerts pile up in my inbox. Cal had never memorized the import codes, didn't understand the weight of paperwork until it collapsed, quiet and slow, like a ceiling leak in the dark. He hadn't even changed the passwords, just revoked my access like that was enough. By Friday, 3 different project managers had texted me under fake pretenses, asking if I had the updated master calendar or if I knew whether June's shipment was still routed through Hamburg. I answered in fragments, careful, measured. I didn't want them caught in whatever Cal was unraveling. Try the internal drive, I replied, even though I knew that drive was blank. You might need to rebuild the schedule, I added, leaving just enough air in the message to say, you're on your own now, without sounding like I was gloating. I wasn't. I was tired. And maybe a little relieved. On Saturday, I ran into Jordan from accounting at the co-op. We stood near the greens, awkward as siblings after a fight. He looked around first, then leaned in. Is it true you just left? He asked, half whispered, half ashamed. I shook my head, took a slow breath. I was asked to leave, I said, watching his eyes change. Was it Cal? I shrugged. Who else? He winced like I'd hit something he couldn't defend. The place feels weird without you, he said, looking down at the potatoes in his basket like they might offer advice. It's quieter, I replied, and walked away. Sunday came with rain and Cal's second text. Still open to talking. I didn't answer, just scrolled through the calendar I'd built for Q1 and watched the color-coded weeks stretch out like something I used to believe in. Each month had notes, client meetings, shipping windows, renewal deadlines, still perfectly laid out. I clicked on March, saw the deadline for the Vancouver compliance audit blinking red, and felt something cold sit in my chest. Cal didn't know about that audit. He never read the fine print in trade agreements. If he didn't prep, they'd pull certification. Without certification, we'd lose Canada. That night, I sat on the fire escape with my feet bare and the street below slick with early spring runoff. I thought about calling Dad, just once, just to ask if he knew what Cal had done. But the idea tasted wrong. Dad wasn't the type to fix things with words. He believed in silence, in watching things shake out, in letting people either sink or stand. That was the deal when he left. You're both grown, he'd said at Christmas. Build what you want. But remember who put up the first brick. I remember. I always remember. Monday morning, I checked the company's website. Cal had already added a photo of himself on the homepage, standing stiffly beside one of the new machines I'd sourced 2 years ago. The caption called him visionary, which made me snort into my mug. Visionaries don't copy old quotes from LinkedIn and call them mission statements. Visionaries don't cut the one person who understood how to rotate inventory around port congestion. Still, I kept scrolling, half curious, half numb, until I saw the new leadership chart. My name was gone. My role was absorbed into something called process innovation, and the person now in charge used to handle warehouse returns. That same afternoon, I got a call from Anya, our customs liaison in Frankfurt. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't need to. Rowan, she said, voice flat, who's managing EU compliance now? I paused. I'm not sure. A silence stretched between us, taut and uneasy. Your brother copied me on an email with the wrong forms. Wrong codes. Wrong contact info. If this isn't fixed by Thursday, we lose standing. You know what that means. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Yeah, I said softly, I know exactly what that means. She exhaled, sharp and short. I'll give it 3 days. I sat in my apartment afterward, the light turning amber across the counter, the box of office things still unopened on the floor. I reached in, pulled out the framed photo of the production floor again. There I was, center left, wearing the navy jumpsuit from the safety drills, squinting at a control panel with grease on my hand. That was a good day. Not because I was needed, but because I was trusted. That photo was 6 years old. Some of the faces in it had already left. Some were still trying to stay afloat. I looked at mine, steady, clear, focused. And I knew exactly what came next. Tuesday morning, I opened the storage bin at the back of my closet, the one with the leather binder Dad gave me after his final board meeting, still unopened, still heavy in a way that made me hesitate every time I touched it. I'd thought it was sentimental, something ceremonial, a handoff that didn't really mean anything once Cal was named president. But sitting on my bedroom floor with my legs half asleep and the city noise bleeding through the window, I finally opened it. Inside, between crisp legal tabs and stamped seals, was something that shouldn't have had my name on it, but did. The first page was a trust deed, dated 6 weeks before Dad retired, listing me as primary executor of all physical and intellectual assets tied to the manufacturing division. I blinked once, twice, then read it again, slower this time, tracing the sentences with my thumb like they might shift under pressure. I wasn't just listed, I was controlling trustee, sole signature authority for the land, the patents, and the vendor contracts. Cal had the office, the title, the speeches. I had the leverage. Quiet, buried leverage written in thick paper and notarized under my full name, including the middle name I never used. I called our old attorney, Dana, from the stairwell, voice low, half certain I was misreading it. She picked up on the second ring, no pleasantries, just a firm, "You finally opened it." I leaned against the cold metal railing, unsure whether to feel betrayed or protected. "You knew," I said. "Your father's instructions were clear," she replied, tone clipped. "He didn't want either of you fighting, he just wanted to make sure the business stayed intact." I paused. "Why me?" There was a quiet breath on the other end. "Then, because you built it. Because you always knew when to shut up and fix things." I hung up without saying goodbye, my heart knocking against my ribs, not fast but hard, like it wanted out. For a moment, I couldn't tell if it felt like a win or a punishment, being the one entrusted, the one Dad counted on to hold the real keys while Cal played pretend upstairs. I remembered a moment last year. Cal bragging to investors about streamlining processes, while I sat in the back quietly managing 5 overlapping supplier deadlines. Dad had looked at me barely, but I caught it. That small nod, like we were both in on something Cal would never understand. That afternoon, my inbox lit up again, Anya from Frankfurt, then Brent from logistics, then even Christian from procurement, all trying to loop Cal into problems he didn't know how to answer. I watched from the sidelines, hands off, just long enough to see how deep the cracks went. The German account was frozen, the secondary warehouse lease in St. Louis had expired, and Cal had signed an NDA that voided a key licensing clause. He didn't even realize. "They're asking for vendor authentication," Christian wrote, "but the last chain of custody is under your login." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed understood. That evening, Cal called. I let it ring twice before picking up. His voice was lighter than it should have been, falsely casual, like we were still 2 kids back in the warehouse playing floor manager. "Hey, Rowan, quick thing, do you remember who had primary clearance on the Euro accounts? I'm locked out of a few folders, no big deal, just need to get some files for finance." I said nothing for a moment, just let the silence stretch until he filled it. "They're asking for chain verification," he added, "thought maybe you could just shoot something over?" I smiled slightly, phone still pressed to my cheek. "I'll look into it." After we hung up, I pulled up the shared drive logs, saw his failed access attempts time-stamped and marked red, one after the other, stacked like bad guesses on a test. He was trying to brute force a system I built, using credentials that hadn't been valid in years. I remembered once, during the pandemic, staying up until 3 a.m. on a Zoom call with 3 vendors just to renegotiate shipping terms, Cal asleep in the other room. I'd done it because it needed to be done. Because someone had to. Now, he was standing in the middle of that structure, clueless, with the roof starting to creak. Before bed, I opened the trust folder again, laid each page out on the counter like a puzzle I already knew how to finish. The final tab was marked contingencies, and inside it, one simple sentence: "All rights revert immediately upon mismanagement or breach of fiduciary responsibility." I sat back, stared at those words, letting them sink beneath my skin. There was no revenge here. No fireworks. Just architecture. My father had given Cal a stage and given me the beams underneath. And Cal, in his need to shine, had already started dancing too hard. On Thursday, Anya copied me on a final email before stepping back. The subject line was curt, just initials and a shipment number, but the message was clear. Certifications were not updated. We've suspended fulfillment. Expect contractual penalties. The chain included Cal, though she hadn't addressed him directly. I stared at the screen, sipping tea gone bitter, while the weight of silence sat between the lines. If I replied, I'd be confirming oversight. If I didn't, the damage would root deeper. I closed the tab. Some lessons couldn't be taught gently, especially to men who mistook access for authority. Later that afternoon, I ran into Brent at the shared printer in the co-op workspace I'd been using since leaving. He looked surprised, like I wasn't supposed to exist outside the building. "How long you planning to stay away?" he asked, thumb flicking at a corner of paper. "As long as I need to," I replied, folding a page in half neatly. He didn't press. After a pause, he said, "Cal's been spiraling. Word is he approved a bid without legal review, 6 figures. Wrong vendor entirely." I tilted my head. Didn't know he was signing bids. Brent gave a low whistle. "That's the problem." Friday morning brought a voicemail from HR, someone named Olivia who sounded too young to have that much uncertainty in her voice. "Hi, Rowan, we're trying to locate records for the pre-expansion vendor accounts and some of the original distribution files. We can't seem to." "Well, there's missing access, and Cal mentioned you might still be a resource." She trailed off, like she knew she shouldn't be leaving that message at all. I saved it. Not to use. Just to keep. Like a receipt. I kept walking down to the coffee shop, same as always, the morning too bright for what it carried. At noon, I got an email marked confidential, board correspondence. I wasn't copied by mistake. It came from Carmen, one of the 3 outside directors, someone who rarely raised her voice, but always chose the right moment to move a piece. The subject was a request for oversight review. Inside were questions about asset control, contract delays, and the scope of executive authority granted to the new president. My name didn't appear in the body, but the gaps were shaped like me. I read it twice, then walked outside, phone in hand, letting the cold wind fill the space between understanding and action. That night, Cal called again. His voice was tighter now, the smile worn thin. "Hey, so, there's a bit of a situation with procurement. Some files went missing, and I figured you'd know where to check." I leaned against the kitchen counter, kept my tone neutral. "Which files?" He hesitated, then laughed like we were still friends. "Honestly, all of them?" "I mean, I know you didn't take them," but I cut him off softly. "Did you check the encrypted vault?" Silence. Then a small cough. "There's a vault." I didn't answer right away. Just let the question hang like it deserved space. The weekend came with quiet unraveling. My phone buzzed twice on Saturday, once from a logistics lead I'd trained, once from Cal's assistant, who asked, carefully, whether I still had notes from last year's lean audit. I replied only to the first. "You'll need the compliance log from April 8th. It's on the drive." She sent back a single heart emoji. The second message I left unanswered. I sat by the window, watching the sky darken too early, my notes spread across the coffee table in rows. I wasn't planning anything. I was documenting. There's a difference between a threat and a ledger. By Sunday night, word had reached someone it shouldn't have. Dana, our attorney, forwarded a message from an investor. Concerned about operational irregularities and missing procedural safeguards. In the thread, Cal had replied once, poorly. "We're streamlining," he wrote, which might have worked if the sentence hadn't been surrounded by evidence of exactly the opposite. Dana's only comment was a single line, "Do you want me to move yet, or wait until the floor caves in?" I didn't respond right away. I sat with it, staring at the framed photo of the plant floor again, watching the younger version of myself lean over blueprints that still worked. Monday morning, the board called a special meeting. I wasn't asked to attend, but I knew the timing. I knew the signatures. I knew Carmen wouldn't move unless the floor was already cracked. Somewhere in that room, Cal was explaining timelines and shifting blame, trying to keep his voice level while explaining how critical systems were suddenly lost, how he didn't know that supply chain documentation had expiration dates, how he signed a bit he hadn't read. And somewhere in that room, someone was opening the trust folder for the first time. Someone was reading my name aloud, slowly, carefully, like it was the part they'd missed. The call came late, almost midnight, Cal's name lighting up my phone like a warning. I didn't answer, just listened to the voicemail spill out ragged, his voice hoarse like he'd run out of places to hide. "They've frozen the Vancouver deal I need," he broke off, then started again, quieter. "Rowan, if you're getting this, I need to fix it. Please call me." I sat there a while, phone face down, the street outside empty. Somewhere upstairs, someone dropped a pan. I poured myself a glass of water, drank it slow, let the night settle in. By morning, the legal assistant from the board had already emailed me a copy of the internal findings. "Significant breach of fiduciary responsibility," the line read, formal but final. Cal hadn't just made mistakes, he'd signed contracts without secondary oversight, pushed through a vendor partnership that flagged 2 compliance filters, and falsified a line item to make the last quarterly report look better than it was. I skimmed it quietly, one leg tucked under me, still in pajamas. There wasn't much shock left. Just the strange hum of watching something tip the way you knew it would, and still feeling the wind of it. Dana called next, brief as always. "They're removing him from active control," she said, tone even. "They want to meet with you about transitional measures." I exhaled through my nose, nodding even though she couldn't see me. "Tell them I'll come in. But I'm not stepping in permanently." She paused. "You're sure?" I looked at the plant folder still open on my desk, half-read specs and year-old emails. "I'm sure," I said. "Let them find someone else to sit in the chair. I'll help them study the structure. But I'm not here to play savior." She said okay, didn't argue. That's why I trust her. When I walked back into the building, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt smaller. The floor tiles still clicked the same, the reception desk had new flowers. April saw me first, stood too fast, knocking her knee on a drawer. "Rowan," she whispered, like I was a ghost she wasn't sure would speak. "Hi," I said softly, not moving too fast. "Just here for a meeting." She blinked, nodded, then reached under her desk and pulled out a box. "I kept it," she said, smiling nervously. "I didn't want them to throw it out. My old mug. My hard hat. A photo of me and the night crew. The board meeting was short, clinical. They offered the role outright. I turned it down. I gave them a list of restructuring options instead, pointed out which contracts to renegotiate, which systems to rebuild. I answered questions without giving them more than they asked for. There was a moment at the end, just as I stood to leave, when someone said, "You know, it's unusual, what your father did, splitting power that way." I turned back, one hand on the chair. "He knew exactly what he was doing," I said. "He didn't split anything. He just put it where it belonged." Then I walked out. I passed Cal in the lobby, his eyes rimmed red, suit wrinkled at the collar. He stood when he saw me, opened his mouth, then closed it again. "They're saying you'll fix it," he mumbled, his voice too thin for the space. "I'm helping study it," I corrected. He nodded slowly, shame thick around his shoulders like smoke. "You could take it if you wanted," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You should have been running it anyway." I gave the smallest shrug, not unkind. Sometimes the cost of proving that is higher than the prize. He didn't argue. He just sat back down. That night, I drove by the old plant one last time. The lights were off, but the silhouette of it still lived like memory in my chest. I rolled down the window, let the cold air bite at my knuckles. My phone buzzed once, "April, a thank you." Then again, "Dad," just 3 words, "You were ready." I didn't reply. Not yet. I sat there with the motor running, hand resting lightly on the wheel, not gripping anything. For the first time in months, my body wasn't bracing. I had nothing left to prove, nothing to claim, nothing I needed returned. In the morning, I made a new list. Personal this time. Books I wanted to read. Places I might drive to. A class I saw online that had nothing to do with contracts or vendor calls. I set the list on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a wrench. Cal gave it to me once as a joke, before titles started meaning anything. I let the kettle boil too long, watered my plants, answered a call from a friend I'd been ignoring. The day moved like honey, slow and forgiving. And I moved with it, like someone who finally stopped asking to be seen.